The ember awakens.
I feel its power.
It hungers for more.
Then let it rise.
Rise.
The Girl in the Snow. The night the Vampire King sentenced her to die was the night he unknowingly surrendered his throne. Not to magic. Not to prophecy. But to a homeless girl standing barefoot in the snow. The border of the Crimson Dominion. The forest did not welcome the living. It breathed cold. Tall black pines stretched into a moonless sky, their branches clawing at drifting mist. Snow fell in thin, silent sheets, too quiet, too still, as if even the wind feared what ruled these lands. This was the border of the Crimson Dominion, where humans vanished and monsters ruled. Ilara Vale walked alone. Her boots were torn, her coat thin, her hands red from cold. She had learned long ago that hunger hurt less than humiliation. That silence was safer than asking for help. Tonight, she was not running from bullies. Not hiding from cruel landlords. Not escaping drunken fists. Tonight, she was running toward something. A child. A little boy she had found shivering behind a broken carriage hours earlier, abandoned by traders who refused to carry extra weight. She had wrapped him in her only blanket and left him inside a hollow tree trunk to block the wind. "I'll come back," she had whispered. And now she searched the forest for shelter, anything with warmth. She didn't know she had crossed into forbidden land. She didn't know she had stepped into a kingdom where humans were considered prey. She only knew the boy would not survive the night without fire. A distant howl cut through the trees. Low. Not animal. Ilara froze. The forest shifted. And then figures emerged from the mist. Tall. Elegant. Eyes glowing faint red in the darkness. Vampire sentinels. She had heard the stories. She did not scream. She did not run. One guard stepped forward. "You crossed sacred ground." Her voice trembled but did not break. "There's a child freezing beyond the ridge. I need wood. That's all." The guard tilted his head. Humans begged. Humans cried. This one negotiated. Another guard sniffed the air. "She smells wrong." Ilara's heart pounded, but not from fear. From something warmer. Something old. Magic stirred under her skin like a sleeping ember disturbed by wind. The guard seized her arms. Silver cuffs snapped shut around her wrists. She winced as they burned. Still, she whispered one thing before losing consciousness from the cold. "Please, don't let him die." The Winter Blood Assembly. The Crimson Palace rose from black stone like a cathedral carved from night itself. Inside, torches burned with blue flame. Nobles in dark velvet and blood-red silk gathered beneath vaulted ceilings. Laughter echoed. Goblets clinked. It was the Winter Blood Assembly, when the Vampire King addressed his court. On the throne sat Lucien Vermont. Ancient. Impossibly composed. White blonde hair falling across a sharp brow. Eyes like polished garnet. He had ruled for 3 centuries. He had crushed rebellions. Executed traitors. Outlived every queen offered to him. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The hall quieted when the doors burst open. Guards dragged in a human girl. Murmurs erupted instantly. A trespasser? During assembly? How revolting. Ilara was forced to her knees. Snow still clung to her hair. Her lips were pale, but her spine remained straight. Lucien studied her lazily at first. Another human mistake. Another execution. Routine. Then he inhaled. And something shifted. Her scent. It was not fear. It was not submission. It was wildfire beneath frost. The guard spoke. She crossed the sacred border, Your Majesty. Lucian descended one step from his throne. Do you know where you stand, human? Elara lifted her gaze directly into his. The entire court inhaled sharply. No human held eye contact with the vampire king. Somewhere warm, she said quietly. Gasps filled the hall. Lucian felt something unfamiliar. Interest. You show little fear. She swallowed. I show little patience for dying over misunderstandings. A ripple of offended hisses passed through nobles. Lucian crouched slightly, eye level with her. You trespass in my kingdom. There's a child outside your kingdom, she replied, voice cracking now. Freezing. There it was. Not pride. Not defiance. Desperation for someone else. The court began chanting. Execution. Execution. Lucian raised one finger. Silence. He extended his senses deeper. And felt it clearly. Magic. Ancient. Dormant. Impossible. Witch blood. The last witch coven had been slaughtered centuries ago. By his ancestors. The prophecy surfaced in his mind like an unwanted memory. The king shall fall not by blade, but by ember reborn. He had dismissed it as myth. He straightened slowly. Release her. Shock tore through the hall. Your Majesty, a noble protested. Lucian's eyes flared crimson. I said release her. The cuffs unlocked. Elara collapsed forward slightly, weakened. Lucian turned to his court. She remains under royal protection until further notice. Outrage exploded. You would shelter prey? She could be cursed. Lucian's voice cut through the chaos. If any harm comes to her without my command, I will personally remind you why I am king. Silence fell like a blade. Elara stared up at him. Confused. Suspicious. Why? She whispered. He leaned close enough that only she could hear. Because you are far more dangerous than you realize. The pawn in the palace. Elara expected a dungeon. Instead, she was placed in a tower chamber overlooking the frozen forest. Soft bed. Fireplace. Food. She did not touch the food at first. Kindness had always come with a price. A servant entered cautiously, a young vampire girl barely older than Elara. I'm Mara, she said softly. His Majesty ordered you be treated with respect. Elara blinked. Respect? She hadn't heard that word directed at her in years. That night, Lucian watched from the shadows beyond her door. He observed the way she folded blankets neatly before sleeping. The way she left half her bread untouched. The way she whispered a quiet prayer for the child in the forest. Lucian had already sent scouts. The boy was safe. But she didn't know that. She thought she might die tomorrow. And still, she prayed for someone else. It unsettled him. For centuries, humans had approached him with greed or fear. Never, compassion. He told himself he kept her alive for strategic reasons. To study her magic. To prevent rebellion. To control prophecy. But when she shivered in her sleep, he almost stepped inside. Almost. Humiliation in the court. The next evening, Lucian summoned her publicly. Whispers followed her entrance. Some nobles deliberately stepped into her path. One accidentally knocked wine onto her dress. Laughter. Elara lowered her eyes. Not in submission. In restraint. Lucian saw it all. But he did not intervene. Not yet. He needed to see her break point. A tall noblewoman approached. "You should feel honored to die in such luxury." Ilara finally spoke. "I don't plan to." Mocking laughter. "And how will you stop it, little mortal?" Ilara met her gaze. "By surviving." A sudden pulse of heat rippled from her chest. Candles flickered violently. Several vampires hissed in discomfort. Lucian stood abruptly. The room stilled. Magic. Uncontrolled. Raw. It was awakening. And every noble felt it. He stepped down slowly. Took her hand. The contact sent a shock through both of them. Not pain. Recognition. The noblewoman bowed quickly. Lucian addressed the court. "She is not prey. She is under my protection." The emphasis was unmistakable. "Touch her, and you challenge me." For the first time in centuries, the Vampire King had drawn a line. For a human girl. Night fell heavy. Ilara stood alone on the balcony, staring toward the forest ridge, wondering if the boy was alive. Behind her, a whisper of air. A silver blade flashed. Lucian moved before thought. The dagger pierced his palm instead of her heart. Silver burned. Smoke rose from immortal flesh. Ilara screamed. The assassin fled into shadow, one of the nobles. Lucian did not chase. His eyes never left her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "You're burning." He pulled the blade free calmly. Silver seared deep. She tore fabric from her own dress and pressed it to his wound. "You saved me," she whispered. He held her gaze. "Do not misunderstand. If someone wants you dead, you are valuable." But his voice lacked conviction. Because what he felt was not strategy. It was fear. The idea of her lifeless on cold stone sent a strange ache through his immortal chest. Ilara's fingers glowed faintly gold as she pressed against the wound. The burn slowed. Lucian stared. "You healed me." She looked down, startled. "I didn't mean to." Magic had responded to emotion. To protect. Not destroy. He studied her carefully. "You are not weak." She laughed softly through tears. "You've clearly never been homeless." Silence. Then something rare happened. Lucian smiled faintly. The first crack in centuries of ice. The court believed she would become his pawn. A tool. A weapon. A threat. But that night, standing on a snow-covered balcony beneath silver moonlight, it was Lucian who felt the shift. Not power. Not domination. But something infinitely more dangerous. Hope. The prophecy had warned a witch would enslave a king. It never said how. As snow fell quietly over the Crimson Dominion, the Vampire King began to change. And he didn't even realize it yet. Cliffhanger line for audience retention. He thought he had spared her life. He didn't realize. She had just begun to transform his kingdom. Fire beneath the crown. The court believed she was the king's weakness. They didn't realize. She was the spark that could burn the entire vampire kingdom to ash. Whispers in the dark. The Crimson Palace had never felt so divided. Servants bowed when Ilara passed, not out of respect, but uncertainty. Nobles watched her with narrowed eyes. Some with hatred. Some with fear. Because fear spreads faster than loyalty. And word had already begun circulating. The king bled for her. In vampire culture, that meant something sacred. Lucian stood before the council chamber doors the next evening. Inside, 12 ancient nobles waited, the oldest bloodlines in the Dominion. They were not warriors. They were power. and they were furious. When he entered, they did not bow. Lord Varkane, tall, silver-haired, cold-eyed, spoke first. "You risk the stability of centuries for a human girl." Lucien's voice remained calm. "I risk nothing. You bled for her." A charged silence followed. Lucien stepped forward slowly. "I have bled for war. For territory. For this throne. You mistake symbolism for weakness." Varkane's lip curled. "She carries witch blood." The room stilled. Lucien's eyes darkened slightly. And witches once nearly destroyed us." Lucien leaned one hand against the council table. "That was before my reign." The unspoken truth lingered. But prophecy does not care about reigns. Or time. Meanwhile, Elara stood in front of a tall mirror in her chamber. Mara had brought her a gown. Deep midnight blue silk. "You cannot attend dinner dressed like a prisoner," Mara insisted. Elara touched the fabric hesitantly. "I've never worn anything like this." Mara smiled gently. "You've never been protected by a king either." Elara didn't respond. Because protection had always come with chains. She allowed Mara to braid her dark hair loosely, leaving soft strands framing her face. When she entered the great hall that evening, the entire room fell silent. Not because she was royal, but because she didn't look broken. Lucien watched from across the chamber. She walked carefully, not like someone trying to belong, but like someone refusing to shrink. Nobles whispered. A few smirked. One vampire deliberately stepped into her path again. "You look prettier when silent, human." Elara paused. She felt the ember stir again. Instead of anger, she said softly. "And you look stronger when you don't need to insult someone smaller than you." Gasps rippled outward. Lucien nearly smiled. The noble raised his hand, not to strike, but to intimidate. Lucien's voice cut through the hall. "Lower your hand." The noble obeyed instantly. Elara did not look at Lucien. But she felt his presence like a shield behind her. And for the first time in her life, she did not feel alone in a room full of predators. Later that night, Lucien found her again on the balcony. She turned sharply when he approached. "Is he alive?" He did not pretend to misunderstand. "Yes." Her knees nearly gave out. She gripped the railing. "You sent someone?" "I sent 10. Her breath hitched. "You could have told me. You would have thanked me. And that bothers you?" Lucien considered that. "Yes." She turned toward him fully now. "You think kindness makes you weak?" He stepped closer. "No. I think it makes you vulnerable." Snow drifted around them. "You're wrong," she whispered. "Kindness is strength." He studied her face in the moonlight. A homeless girl lecturing a king about strength. It should have offended him. Instead, it unsettled him because part of him believed her. Lucien ordered the ancient records brought from the sealed archive tower. If she carried witch blood, he needed proof. Elara insisted on seeing them too. "You don't trust me," she said quietly. "It is not about trust. It never is with you." That stung. He did not show it. The archive smelled of dust and iron ink. Old scrolls lined stone shelves. Elara's fingers brushed across ancient parchment. Then she froze. A sigil. Carved into one of the wooden shelves. A small spiral surrounded by flame-like etchings. Her chest tightened. "I've seen this before." Lucien's gaze sharpened. "Where?" She closed her eyes. "On a necklace my mother wore." The air shifted. "Your mother?" he asked carefully. "She died when I was little. People said she was strange. That she cursed the rain 1 year. Lucian felt the truth settle into place. Your mother was not strange. He pulled an old scroll from the shelf. Unrolled it slowly. There, drawn in ink centuries old, was the same spiral sigil. The Ember Coven. The last witch lineage. Slaughtered by vampire forces under an older king. Ilara's fingers trembled. You killed them. Lucian did not deny it. I was not king yet. But you are now. The weight of history pressed into the space between them. And if my bloodline was hunted by yours, she whispered, why protect me? He met her gaze fully. Because I will not repeat the mistakes of my ancestors. For the first time, she saw something behind his composure. Regret. The council did not wait. Fear makes old men reckless. That same night, Lord Varkane gathered loyal houses. The king is compromised, he declared. By a witch. Whispers turned into strategy. Silver weapons were distributed quietly. Guards reassigned. Rumors spread that Lucian had been bewitched. And the most dangerous rumor of all. That Ilara would soon sit beside him as queen. Inside the palace, tension thickened. Mara approached Ilara in secret. You must be careful. Of what? Of being loved by a king. Ilara blinked. Loved? Mara hesitated. He watches you differently. Ilara's pulse quickened. He did not love her. He was studying her. Protecting her. Strategizing. But when he bled for her, that hadn't felt strategic. The attack came during the midnight court. 12 nobles surrounded the throne. Varkane stepped forward boldly. By ancient right, we question your rule. Lucian rose slowly. On what grounds? Corruption. Which influence? Emotional compromise. Murmurs spread. Ilara stood at the edge of the hall. Varkane pointed at her. She is the ember from prophecy. All eyes turned. Lucian's voice grew cold. You accuse your king of weakness. We accuse you of surrendering our future. Varkane signaled. Guards drew silver blades. Chaos erupted. Lucian moved like lightning. 2 attackers fell instantly. But 3 rushed toward Ilara. She backed away, heart racing. Silver flashed. Something inside her broke open. Not anger. Not revenge. Fear of losing the only person who had chosen her. Heat exploded from her chest. Golden fire burst outward in a wave. Silver weapons melted midair. Vampires staggered backward, hissing in pain. The hall filled with blazing light. Ilara stood at the center. Eyes glowing molten gold. Lucian stared in stunned silence. The Ember Coven lived. Inside her. The fire did not burn innocence. It shielded. It repelled only those who intended harm. Even in awakening. Her magic chose protection. The room went silent. Varkane stepped back in disbelief. She controls it. Lucian stepped beside her. Not in front. Beside. He addressed the court. You feared she would enslave me. His voice echoed through stone. You were wrong. He turned toward Ilara slightly. I stand here by choice. The meaning was unmistakable. No spell. No compulsion. His loyalty was his own. And that frightened the council more than magic ever could. Later, alone in the throne room's aftermath. Ilara trembled. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. You didn't, Lucian replied softly. She looked up at him. I'm not a weapon. I know. Then what am I? He stepped closer. Snow drifted through broken windows. You are change. Silence wrapped around them. She searched his face. "And what does that make you?" Lucien's expression shifted, something vulnerable breaking through centuries of control. "Uncertain." For a king, that was a confession. For a girl who had never been chosen. It felt like the beginning of something dangerous. Not domination. Not prophecy. But connection. The prophecy had warned. A witch will bend the vampire king to her will. But prophecy never explained. What happens when the king kneels willingly? The Ember Crown.
The Ember awakens.
The prophecy
feel
never
its
said the
power.
witch would
It
destroy
hungers
the
for
king.
more.
Then let it rise.
It said she would make him kneel.
Rise.
And tonight, he would kneel for her, in front of the entire kingdom. The palace had not slept. After the golden fire erupted in the great hall, fear spread through the crimson dominion like poison in water. Some vampires whispered, "She is the end of us." Others said, "She is the future." But no one remained neutral. Elara stood alone in her chamber, staring at her hands. They still felt warm. Still felt alive. When she closed her eyes, she could feel the ember inside her, steady now, not wild. Not chaos. Power. And that frightened her more than the attack. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Lucien entered without waiting for permission. He looked different. Less composed. Less distant. "The council has split," he said. "She didn't turn. Because of me. Because of fear," he corrected. She faced him now. "I burned them. You protected yourself. I could have killed them." "Yes." The word lingered heavily. Lucien stepped closer. "But you didn't." That mattered. In vampire politics, restraint was more terrifying than violence. "You were not consumed by it," he added quietly. Elara's voice dropped. "What if next time I am?" Lucien held her gaze steadily. "Then I will stand with you. Not against. Not above. With." That was new. Later that evening, Lucien summoned her to the deepest chamber of the palace, a room carved beneath the throne itself. Ancient torches flickered blue along the walls. In the center stood a stone altar. On it, an old iron-bound book. Lucien opened it slowly. "The prophecy the council fears," he said. Elara stepped closer. The parchment inside was brittle with age. He read aloud. "From ember born and blood betrayed. The witch shall rise where kingdoms fade. The crown of night shall bend its knee. Not by force, but willingly." Silence swallowed the chamber. Elara's breath was shallow. "Willingly." Lucien's jaw tightened. "They believe you will control me." She looked up at him. "Will I?" His eyes softened, something rare, something vulnerable. "Do you want to?" The question wasn't political. It was personal. Elara stepped back slightly. "I don't want power over you." "Then what do you want?" The truth came out before she could stop it. "I want to stop being powerless." The words echoed. Lucien understood that sentence more than she realized. Power had been his shield. Her lack of it had been her prison. They stood on opposite sides of the same wound. Outside the palace walls, tension escalated. Several noble houses refused to pledge loyalty. Varkane had disappeared. Rumors claimed he was gathering forces near the eastern border. Human villages began reporting strange sightings. Not attacks. Recruitment. Varkane was forming a faction, vampires who believed humans must be eradicated before witches rise again. Fear was becoming war. Inside the palace, the court grew colder. Elara walked through halls where whispers followed like shadows. She bewitched him. She corrupted him. She'll sit on our throne. But something else was happening too. Servants began bowing with sincerity. A young guard thanked her quietly for stopping the fire before it spread. She blinked in surprise. "You're not afraid of me?" He shook his head. "I'm afraid of those who wanted you dead." Word was shifting. Not everyone feared her. Some respected her. And that was far more dangerous to the council than magic. The confrontation. Lucian stood before the divided council once more. This time, Elara stood beside him. Not behind. Varkane's seat remained empty. Lucian addressed the remaining nobles calmly. "You question my rule because I chose restraint." An elder noble hissed softly. "You chose a witch." Lucian's voice sharpened slightly. "I chose justice." The word unsettled them. Justice had never been a priority in vampire law. "Elara Vale is not your enemy," he continued. "But if you make her one, you will regret it." A noble stood abruptly. "We will not kneel to a human." Lucian turned slowly. "You kneel to your king." The air tightened. The noble hesitated, then slowly bent his knee. Not to Elara. To Lucian. But the message was clear. He would not separate her from his authority. Elara felt the shift deeply. He was risking civil war for her. After the council dismissed, she confronted him privately. "You're pushing them. They pushed first. You could lose your throne." Lucian stepped close enough that she could feel his cold breath. "I have ruled for centuries. And none of it mattered." Her heart stuttered. "Until now." Silence trembled between them. Slow. Heavy. Dangerous. She looked away first. Because if she didn't, she might forget every boundary she'd built to survive. The betrayal. That night, betrayal struck from within. Mara. Sweet, gentle Mara. Elara found her standing outside her chamber with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Before Elara could react, silver chains wrapped around her wrists. Enchanted silver. Magic binding. Pain shot through her veins. "Varkane promised my family protection," Mara sobbed. "They said you would destroy us." Elara didn't scream. Didn't curse. She looked at Mara with heartbreak. "You could have asked me." The door burst open. Lucian entered like a storm. His eyes blazed. Mara fell to her knees. "Please." Lucian's voice dropped into something terrifying. "You betrayed my protection." Guards dragged Mara away. Elara gasped through pain. "Don't kill her." Lucian froze. "She tried to deliver you to Varkane. She was afraid. She endangered you." Elara met his eyes. "And if fear is punishable by death, then your kingdom will drown in blood." That hit him harder than any blade. He dismissed the guards. Mara would be imprisoned. Not executed. The first noble spared for treason in centuries. The court would see it as weakness. Lucian didn't care. Elara collapsed once the silver chains were removed. He caught her before she hit the floor. For the first time, she didn't pull away. Her head rested briefly against his chest. His arms tightened instinctively. Not possession. Protection. The kneeling king. Morning came with news. Varkane had declared open rebellion. Half the eastern houses pledged to him. War was inevitable. The throne room filled again, tension thick as smoke. Lucian addressed the assembled nobles and warriors. "Varkane believes fear will preserve this kingdom." His gaze shifted briefly to Elara. "I believe fear will destroy it." Murmurs spread. He stepped down from the throne. Walked toward Elara in front of everyone. Every eye followed. And then he knelt. The entire court gasped. Lucien Vermont, the immortal king, on one knee, before a human girl. "I kneel," he said clearly, not in surrender, but in alliance. Silence thundered. "I do not fear her power," he continued. "I trust it." Ilara's chest tightened painfully. This was not prophecy forcing him. This was choice. "And if any among you doubt her loyalty," Lucien finished, "you challenge mine." He stood slowly. The symbolism was undeniable. The king had bent his knee. Willingly. The prophecy was unfolding, but not as the council imagined. Ilara stepped forward, voice steady. "I do not seek your throne." She faced the nobles directly. "I seek a kingdom where fear is not law." Some looked unconvinced. Some conflicted. But something had shifted irreversibly. The king and the witch stood united. Not ruler and pawn. Not master and weapon. Partners. Later, alone again in the quiet after the storm, Ilara approached him softly. "You shouldn't have done that." "Kneel?" "Yes." He studied her. "Did it frighten you?" She hesitated. "It made me feel seen." Lucien stepped closer. "You are not a pawn, Ilara. And you are not my enemy." Their hands brushed briefly. Not fire. Not lightning. But something steadier. Something deeper. Outside the palace walls, war gathered. Inside the throne room, something else was forming. Not domination. Not destiny. Choice. And sometimes, choice is more powerful than prophecy. Varkane's army marches at dawn. The witch's ember has awakened. The king has chosen his side. But the real question is, when war comes, will Ilara choose mercy? Or will she finally choose power? War of blood and ember. When the first vampire fell, it wasn't by the king's hand. It was by hers. And in that moment, the kingdom realized the witch was no longer awakening. She had arrived. Dawn of rebellion. The eastern skies burned crimson as Varkane's forces marched toward the capital. Thousands of armored vampires. Ancient houses flying their sigils. Silver-tipped spears. War drums echoing through frozen valleys. Inside the Crimson Palace, soldiers prepared for battle. Lucien stood armored in black steel etched with royal crests. His presence alone steadied warriors. But his gaze searched for only one person. Ilara stood at the palace balcony, wind whipping her dark hair. She felt it. Not just approaching armies, but fear, anger, hatred, all directed at her existence. Lucien approached quietly. "You do not have to fight." She didn't look at him. "If I hide now, they win. They are not coming for you alone." "They are," she said softly. "You are just in their way." He didn't deny it. Snow began falling again, as if the sky wanted to soften what was coming. Lucien stepped beside her. "I have fought wars for centuries. And won them." "Yes." She finally turned to him. "But this one is different. Because this war was not about territory. It was about ideology. Fear versus change. And she was the symbol of that change." The first strike. The battlefield stretched beyond the palace gates. White snow stained dark as the first clash erupted. Steel against steel. Speed beyond human sight. Screams. Roars. Ilara stood behind the front lines initially, heart racing. Lucien fought like a force of nature, moving through enemy ranks with brutal precision. But Varkane had prepared. Silver explosives ignited across the field. Royal soldiers fell. Lucien turned sharply toward the eastern flank, where a group of rebels had broken through. They were heading straight toward the palace gates. Toward civilians. Toward servants. Toward humans who had taken shelter inside. Elara saw it. Before Lucien could reach them, her pulse roared in her ears. She ran forward. Elara. Lucien's voice thundered behind her. Too late. The rebel commander raised his silver blade toward a young palace guard. And that was when the fire answered her fully. Golden light exploded outward in a controlled wave. Not chaotic. Not wild. Precise. The silver weapons disintegrated into ash midair. The rebels were thrown backward, but not incinerated. Elara stepped forward through the smoke. Eyes glowing molten gold. Voice steady. This ends now. The rebel commander lunged blindly. She raised her hand. The ember concentrated. One blast. Direct. He fell. Not dead. But unconscious. The battlefield froze. Both sides stared. The witch had fought. And she had chosen control. Lucien reached her seconds later. Breathing heavy. Not from exhaustion. From fear. You could have been killed. She met his gaze. So could they. Her eyes flickered toward fallen soldiers on both sides. War had begun. And she had crossed the line from protected to protector. Varkane's truth. Night fell, but the war did not stop. Varkane finally revealed himself at the front lines. Tall. Cold. Smiling. He stepped forward between armies. So the ember fights. Elara stood beside Lucien now. Varkane's eyes gleamed. You think this is about fear? It is, Lucien answered calmly. Varkane laughed softly. No. This is about survival. He looked directly at Elara. Your coven nearly destroyed us once. Did he tell you that? Silence. Lucien's jaw tightened. Varkane continued. Witches tried to enslave vampire blood. Tried to drain immortality into themselves. Elara's breath caught. She turned to Lucien slowly. He did not look away. There were extremists, he admitted quietly. But not all. Varkane's voice rose. And if she loses control? If that power spreads? You gamble our species on her morality. The word struck deeply. Because that was the core fear. Not that she was evil. But that she might become uncontrollable. Varkane pointed toward Lucien. You kneel to her. Lucien's voice became steel. I kneel to no one. Varkane smirked. But you would die for her. Silence. Lucien did not answer. And that silence was answer enough. Varkane raised his army's signal. Then die together. The second wave charged. The breaking point. This battle was different. Varkane's forces used enchanted silver nets. Explosive runes. Old magic stolen from destroyed covens. Elara felt the pull of dark magic twisting in the air. Corrupted ember. Weaponized. One blast struck near her. She staggered. Lucien tore through enemies to reach her. But a silver spear pierced his side mid-run. He dropped to one knee. The world slowed. Elara saw red. Not blood. Rage. Raw. Terrifying. The ember surged violently. Snow evaporated around her. Air cracked with heat. She walked toward Varkane like a rising sun. You want to see what I could become? She whispered. The fire gathered above her like a miniature star. Vampires on both sides recoiled. This was not controlled protection. This was devastation waiting for permission. Varkane smiled faintly. Yes, he said. Show them. Lucien forced himself upright despite the spear. Ilara. His voice cut through her fury. She didn't hear it. The fire intensified. Cracks formed in the earth. This was the moment prophecy feared. This was the moment she could end the war in one catastrophic strike. Kill hundreds. Maybe thousands. Her mother's blood screamed for justice. For vengeance. For balance. Lucien staggered forward and did the unthinkable. He stepped directly into the inferno. Flames tore across his armor. He fell to both knees before her. Not from surrender. From choice. Ilara, look at me. His voice was rough, burning. Not them. Her glowing eyes flickered. You don't have to become their fear. The fire trembled. You are not vengeance. His hands, burning, reached toward her. You are better than this. Tears streamed down her face. The ember shuddered violently. Then collapsed inward. The battlefield plunged into silence. The flames vanished. Lucien fell forward into the snow. Alive. Barely. Ilara dropped beside him, sobbing. I almost. You didn't, he whispered. That was the difference. Choice. She had power to destroy. And she chose not to. Varkane watched in disbelief. Because he had counted on her breaking. Instead, she proved him wrong. The sacrifice. Lucien was carried back to the palace, gravely wounded by silver corruption. The spear had been laced with ancient poison. It would kill even an immortal king. He lay in the royal chamber, pale, breathing shallow. Council members argued outside. He is dying because of her. End this now. Eliminate the witch. Ilara ignored them. She sat beside Lucien's bed. The royal healers shook their heads. The poison cannot be removed. She looked at his still face. You saved me twice. Her voice broke. And I can't save you once. The ember stirred differently now. Not rage. Not defense. But sacrifice. Witch magic was bound to blood. To life force. To balance. She understood instinctively what must be done. Without telling anyone. She placed her hand over the wound. Closed her eyes. And pulled. The silver corruption began leaving Lucien's body. Flowing into her. Pain unlike anything she'd known ripped through her veins. Her veins darkened. Skin paling. Lucien's breathing steadied. Her heartbeat weakened. Mara, released from imprisonment earlier during chaos, burst into the room. Ilara, stop. But she couldn't. Wouldn't. This was her choice. The poison fully transferred. Lucien's eyes flew open. Ilara. She collapsed forward. Unconscious. The ember dim. Not gone. But dangerously quiet. Lucien caught her. And for the first time in centuries, the vampire king looked afraid. Hours later, Ilara lay still in the royal chamber. Lucien sat beside her, unmoving. The council waited outside. War still raged beyond palace walls. But none of it mattered in this room. She had given her strength to save him. Without hesitation. Without demand. Lucien leaned closer, voice low. You were never my pawn. His hand gently brushed her hair back. You were my anchor. Her fingers twitched faintly. A weak sign of life. Hope. Outside, Varkane prepared for one final assault, believing the witch weakened. But he had miscalculated. Because now, the king no longer fought for power. He fought for her. And that made him unstoppable. The witch sacrificed her power to save the king.
My love,
The
the
king
world
will
is
now
ours.
burn the world
Forever,
to
my
protect
king.
her.
Let the snow
But
witness
when
our
she
vow.
wakes,
And the stars seal it.
will she still be the same? The crown that chose compassion. The war did not end with fire. It ended with a choice. And the most feared vampire king in history chose love over power. The witch who fell silent. Elara did not wake for 3 days. The palace felt hollow without her presence. Even the torches burned lower, as if the kingdom itself held its breath. Lucian never left her side. Not for counsel. Not for war updates. Not even when generals begged for orders. He had ruled through centuries of chaos without hesitation. But now, his world narrowed to the fragile rise and fall of her breathing. Outside the palace walls, Varkane spread word quickly. The witch is dying. The king is weakened. Strike now. Rebel forces advanced once more toward the capital. The council stormed into the royal chamber. You must command the army. Lucian did not look at them. You command it. You are the king. And she saved your king, he replied coldly. Perhaps remember that before speaking of strategy. They fell silent. For the first time, they saw something terrifying. Lucian was not ruling from fear anymore. He was ruling from devotion. And devotion makes a ruler far more dangerous than pride. The ember within. Inside the darkness of unconsciousness, Elara dreamed. She stood in a field of ash. Not burning. After burning. A voice echoed softly, familiar. Her mother's. Power is never the crown, Elara. It is the burden. She turned. The ember flickered in her chest, faint but alive. You gave too much, the voice continued. I had to. Then you must choose again. The ash field shifted. She saw 2 paths. One where she reclaimed her power fully, brighter than before. Stronger. Unstoppable. The other where she remained weakened, human, vulnerable. But free from the hunger of magic. You cannot be both fire and shelter, the voice whispered. Elara closed her eyes. She remembered Lucian kneeling in flames. Not demanding control. Not fearing her strength. Trusting her. That was the difference. She didn't need to dominate. She needed to guide. And guidance required balance. When she opened her eyes, the ember reignited. Not blazing. Not overwhelming. Steady. Controlled. Her own. The king unleashed. Meanwhile, Varkane's final assault began. Explosions rocked the palace gates. Rebel forces breached outer walls. Lucian rose from Elara's bedside slowly. He leaned down, brushing a strand of hair from her face. If you wake, he murmured quietly, forgive what I am about to do. He stepped into the throne hall. Armor fastened. Eyes burning crimson. The council followed in silence. This was no longer a political conflict. This was personal. The battlefield outside erupted in chaos. Lucian moved like a storm-given flesh. Where he walked, enemies fell. Where he stood, rebels hesitated. He did not roar. He did not scream. He simply advanced. Varkane finally stepped forward to face him. You fight alone now. Lucian's voice was calm. I always have. They clashed. Steel shattered. Stone cracked. Varkane struck with silver-laced blades. Lucian fought through pain. Not for territory. Not for dominance. But because someone inside those walls had chosen him. And that changed everything. Varkane sneered mid-battle. She made you weak. Lucien's eyes darkened. No. He disarmed Varkane with brutal precision. She reminded me what strength truly is. Varkane fell to his knees. The battlefield stilled. Lucien raised his blade. He could end it. Centuries of tradition demanded execution. Instead, he lowered the weapon. You will stand trial. Shock rippled through both armies. Mercy? On a battlefield? Varkane stared in disbelief. You risk rebellion again. Lucien's voice carried across the snow. Then let them rebel against justice. He ordered Varkane imprisoned. The war stopped not with slaughter, but restraint. When Lucien returned to the palace, blood stained his armor. He walked quickly through silent corridors, into the chamber, and froze. Ilara was sitting upright, weak, but awake. Their eyes met. Relief flooded his face, something no soldier had ever witnessed. You shouldn't be standing, she whispered softly. He stepped toward her slowly, as if afraid she would vanish. You shouldn't have saved me. A faint smile touched her lips. We keep doing that. Silence wrapped around them. Not awkward. Not tense. Deep. He knelt beside the bed, not as a king. As a man. I thought I lost you. Her voice trembled slightly. You didn't. You gave up your power. She shook her head gently. No. I chose how to use it. The ember flickered softly beneath her skin, stable. Balanced. He looked at her carefully. You are different. So are you. That was the truth neither could deny. War had stripped pride. Fear had stripped arrogance. What remained was something honest. The final choice. Days later, the throne hall filled once more. Varkane stood restrained before the court. Nobles expected execution. Tradition demanded blood. Lucien addressed the assembly. Varkane sought to preserve fear. He turned toward Ilara, who now stood beside him openly. I seek to end it. Gasps murmured. Lucien continued. From this day forward, humans are no longer prey within the Crimson Dominion. Shock. Outrage. Whispers. And witches, he added calmly, are no longer hunted. Every ancient law trembled. A noble protested. You change centuries in one decree? Lucien's gaze hardened. Yes. He looked toward Varkane. You will not die today. Varkane blinked in confusion. You will live to witness the world you feared. Guards escorted him away. Ilara stepped forward slightly. Her voice steady. We will build treaties with human settlements. Shared protection. Shared law. The council resisted. But the people, soldiers, servants, younger houses, began kneeling. Not to power. To possibility. One by one. Until even the oldest nobles bowed reluctantly. The kingdom did not fall. It evolved. That evening, snow fell gently over the once blood-stained field. Ilara stood at the balcony where everything had begun. Lucien joined her quietly. You turned me into your pawn, he said softly. She smiled faintly. I never controlled you. No. He stepped closer. You made me choose. She looked up at him. And what did you choose? He reached for her hand. Not possessively. Not dominantly. Simply asking. You. The word was simple. But it carried centuries of weight. And this kingdom, he added. Not through fear. She squeezed his hand gently. Through compassion. He studied her carefully. The prophecy said the crown would bend willingly. She tilted her head slightly. It did. Lucien Vermont, ancient, feared, unstoppable, had not been enslaved by magic. He had been changed by love. Not obsession. Not control. Respect. Choice. Partnership. And in that partnership, the kingdom found something it had never known. Peace without terror. Strength without cruelty. Power without oppression. The witch did not burn the throne. She redefined it. And the king? He did not lose his crown. He finally earned it. Because in the end, the most powerful magic in the world was never fire. It was the courage to change.